What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football and Sports Talk Radio. I'll be your host and producer, Logan Landers, and joining me here this afternoon to break down the Week 11 game preview between the Florida Gators, who are currently trying to get out of the struggle right now. They're 4-4 on the year, taking on the Texas Longhorns, who are ranked number 5 in the nation at 7-1. This game is going to be a 12 p.m. Eastern kickoff on ABC, so everyone can watch it if you don't got nothing going on tomorrow. Jay, our resident Texas fan, and also, of course, Jay's from the Elite Sports Entertainment Network. So, Jay, first off, how you doing, man, on this Friday, and how do you see this game shaking out for your Longhorns?
Yeah, it's a good day, Logan. I appreciate you asking. Man, this is there's two big games left for the Longhorns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you got Florida. This is a big game, SEC rival type thing, and then you also got the A&M game, which is a Texas rival game. But I don't want to overlook Kentucky either, because Kentucky is doing some serious stuff in the league right now. They're not ranked or anything, but they can come in and put some disruptions in there. They really can. Almost like Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's kind of that weird team that can kind of disrupt you a little bit, So, we still have some major key games before we wrap up the season and get ready for the conference championship, which I really expect Texas to be there. But I don't want to overlook this game, right? Florida versus Texas. Let's just keep it right here. It's 11 a.m. ABC. Number 5 Texas versus Florida at 4-4 versus Texas at 7-1. So Florida is not a pushover team. I mean, they're a 500 team, so I never want to look past any team in the SEC, much less Florida. When you look at the statistics of it, right? And I hope I say this guy's name right. Lagway. Am I saying that name right, Logan?
Yes, DJ Lagway, who is. Do we know if he's going to be playing, Jay? He didn't really. There's.
That's the
look
thing.
at him. We don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. But I'm going to go off Lagway's numbers, and if it winds up being somebody else, then hey,
so be it.
But when I look at Lagway, he doesn't have very impressive numbers, right? It's 56 and 92, a little over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, but 5 interceptions, which is almost like a wash at that point, right? When you're throwing as many picks as touchdowns, that's never a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. But when you look at yours, even if you take the Georgia game out of the equation, he's played quite well. 130 for 188, almost 1,400 yards, 14 TDs and 6 picks. That's a much better turnover or touchdown to turnover ratio there. One thing I thought that Texas got away in the Georgia game, which really hurt them, was getting away from that true run game of Wisner and Blue. Wisner is averaging, was at 77 carries at 409, 2 touchdowns, about 5.3 average. And I felt like, they minimized him a lot in that game. And I don't know if it's because he got trampled on early and they felt like they needed to go to the passing game more. But basically, Wisner and Blue became a non-factor in that Georgia game. And I don't want to see that happen going forward versus Florida, Kentucky, or even A&M. I think that's going to be detrimental to that team. They've got to get Wisner going. They've got to get Blue going. They've got to establish that run game for Texas to do anything against these formidable SEC foes. When you look at the Florida side of it, you got Johnson, who's got 70 carries at 373 and 4 touchdowns. He's also averaging 5.3. So it's almost like you got a comparable running back situation between Johnson and Wisner. And then you kind of get into the wide receiver part of it. You got Badger at 24 for 560 and 2. And then you got Helm at 31 for 409 or 419 yards at 2 touchdowns. So those guys are even kind of sort of comparable. Maybe I think Badger gets a little bit more per yards, but they're still kind of a comparable situation. When you look at the one loss that Texas has, obviously it was Georgia, and they lost. Was it 34-15? I think it was something like that, 35-15, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then you see Florida, I think they lost to Georgia 34-20. So they almost was comparable games, right? With comparable teams. Then of course you look at Texas, who got the win over Vanderbilt, which 27-24. Again, Vanderbilt, like I said, is one of those teams that can really disrupt you in the rankings. And because they dropped out of number 1 to number 6 or number 5. And then when they played Vanderbilt, because it was a 3-point game, then they dropped to number 6. and then they're coming off a bye week and actually wound up being back up at number 5. This game has huge implications. It's got big implications for Florida trying to get up into the rankings, and also getting a bowl game. And then also it has huge implications for Texas that honestly cannot afford a second loss. I think it's going to really drop them out of the top 12 playoff teams. Certainly puts a much more of a closer damper on them on the SEC championship game. So this game has huge implications for both sides of the equation. So I expect a really hard, well-fought game between the two of these guys. When I look at Ewers and Manning, they both fumbled in that game against Georgia. And I felt like Beck, they allowed him to throw 3 interceptions, but yet still come away with the win. Logan, if you got 3 interceptions on a quarterback, you should never come away with the loss. That should just never happen.
And Florida's saying the same thing because that's what Carson did the week prior.
Exactly.
And they still won. But
exactly.
but Jay, good teams find a way to win.
And that's right. That's exactly right. When I look at the Vanderbilt game, I just want to use that, and I'm gonna wrap up with this. When I look at that Vanderbilt game, you got Ewers at 27-37, 288, 3 touchdowns. But what I don't like is the fact that he threw 2 interceptions. I felt like he should be definitely protecting that ball much more, because if you're throwing 2 interceptions against Vanderbilt, what are you going to do the next time you have to match up against Georgia, or when you got to go up against A&M? Those kind of things get magnified hugely. You got Blue running 10 carries at 47 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. Wisner went 17-79 at 4.6 yards carry, which is great. Those are fine numbers. Again, they're fine numbers if you're going up against Florida. If you're going up against Georgia, you're really going to have to amp it up a little bit, because they do have a really good run defense, which we saw, right? Texas couldn't stop the run, but yet we couldn't even establish the run. And I hope that doesn't carry over into this Florida game where maybe we start running into roadblocks again, because I still don't 100% know, Logan, what we really have in Texas, right? Mm-hmm. You went up against the best team out there and you got spanked. You go up against the worst team. And when I say worst team, is lowerly ranked teams or out of the ranking team, and you play them close. I don't know what we have in this Texas team yet. That's why I kind of I want to stay a little bit reserved on this Florida game, because I still just don't really know what we have in Texas yet. But I will say this: Texas O-line allowed 7 damn sacks on Ewers. Texas, you could not allow 7 damn sacks. It's not going to get the job done. And that's probably why I would almost say that's probably what contributed to the 2 interceptions. As I would say, probably he felt a little rushed. But nevertheless, you got to do a better, because again, he gave up 7 sacks to Georgia. They gave up 4 sacks to Vanderbilt. So that's 11 sacks in 2 games, 1 on a low-end team and 1 on a high-end team. What are we doing, O-line? You've got to do better than this. You've got to improve. I would have thought that the Georgia game would have put a lid under your fire, and you would have destroyed Vanderbilt. But you still give up 4 sacks to a lesser team. So, Sarkisian, get your O-line in check, so that way Ewers can do his job, Wisner and Blue can do their job, and you'll take some of the pressure off that defense. I do think Texas takes it. I think it'll be 28-14, but this is a close game, and they cannot take Florida lightly. They got to go in there with tenacity and start showing that ferocious approach to games rather than the non-ferocious approach, because it's going to hurt them later on as the games get harder if they do make the playoffs.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to take Florida lightly. Look, I know you look at the record, right? 4-4 on the year. They've only, it's pretty much been win 1, lose 1, back and forth for the most part, right? But let's not gloss over the fact, Jay, that Florida last week in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party was leading Georgia at halftime. Yeah. They had a lead at halftime. Yeah. So, and granted, like I mentioned earlier, good team or great teams find a way to win. And Kirby Smart is a great head coach, right? He talked to his team during halftime, made adjustments, like a brand new team in the second half. And that's why Georgia pulled away with it at the end. But with a backup quarterback as well, they were leading. And their defense, like you say, you got 3 interceptions, and you can look at, was it just a bad ball placement or was it good defensive placement? You can decide that on your own. But you don't want to take Florida lightly. Now, if Lagway does play, which we don't know at this time, of this recording. Said he's going to try his best to make it, but we don't know. He's got a hurt hamstring, so that is definitely going to affect him. I think regardless if he does play, he's going to be hampered by it. If he doesn't play, then, well, looks like Warner might be back out there. And look, just not a great performance last week. 7 of 22, only 66 yards. You're not going to get it done. I mean, if it wasn't for the interceptions, I feel like Georgia would have probably ran away with it, but that's just not how it went. So, I mean, they struggled last week. They only got 228 yards of total offense, Jay, in 4 quarters. That's tough. That is tough. Meanwhile, you look at Texas, like you said, had the close game, 3-point victory over Vanderbilt, who has played spoiler pretty much all season, it's felt like. But I think that for Texas, you are coming off a bye week. Let's not forget, you are coming off a bye week. So that probably, if I'm assuming, that was going to help your team. Because you get a week of rest. You said, all right, what did we do wrong here? How can we correct this? And Florida is a good opponent to try, and fix whatever difficulties they had against A&M. This is where, or against Vanderbilt rather, and this is where you try them out against Florida and hopefully beat them. I think that Texas will take this game. I think they're just a more talented program. Quinn Ewers. Honestly, Jam, I thought that Quinn would really take a big leap forward this year, right? I thought that coming into this season, he was going to be maybe the number 1 projected quarterback in this draft class, but he hasn't. I mean, I know he was hurt a little bit, right? But he hasn't taken that big leap that I assumed, and I think you and a lot of Texas fans thought. He's played good, right? He's not playing bad football, but he hasn't reached the potential that I think a lot of people had for him. But he's still getting it done regardless. Like you said, you have to get that running game going. You have to get it going. I mean, granted, you have 16 rushing touchdowns, but you don't have a guy that's ran for over – you only have one guy who's ran for just over 400 yards through 9 games this season. So got to get your running game. Like you said, it all ties back with Texas to that offensive line. If you don't block, you can't really get anything going. If you don't block, your quarterback gets sacked 7-8 times. If you don't block, you can't create holes in the run game. Simple as that.
Logan, if I can interject real quick, going back to the Quinn Ewers thing, I told you in a recent 100 Yards episode when we were talking about Texas, and I told you, I said, Quinn Ewers, has been linked into Heisman conversations. He's been linked at going number 1 in the draft in terms of quarterbacks. And I said this Georgia game is going to make or break Quinn Ewers. And, obviously the game didn't turn out in Quinn Ewers' favor. Obviously the O-line didn't do Quinn Ewers any favors. And Sarkisian taking him out to put Archie Manning in, I want to go back to Quinn Ewers, certainly didn't do him any favors. And that Georgia game, although Quinn Ewers will get drafted by somebody,
of course,
really, that Georgia game, you can't tell me that Georgia game didn't hurt his stock tremendously.
No, and also, it's the pressure, I think, too, more so this year than last year. You had a little bit of it last year, but this year for sure, as you mentioned, with Arch Manning on the bench, who, has already, since he signed with Texas, was dubbed the quarterback of the future, Arch was. So that might be playing a factor as well mentally. We don't know. But, I mean, you're just kind of exploring all options right now. But ultimately, though, I think that Texas will win this game. And the thing, too, Jay, is Texas is in a good spot, right? Number 5. You're still eligible for the top 12, but you're on the outside looking in. And I say that because we know the top 4 teams get a bye week in the first round. That would be pretty sweet to have if you're a top 4 program. In Texas, you're going to have to win a couple more games and hope that another team in the top 4 can lose. Because, Jay, the interesting thing about it, and this is, just looking at things with a crystal ball, if Texas does end up losing another game this year, whether it be Florida, whichever, Alabama's still in the top 12. They've lost twice. Right? They've lost twice.
Yeah.
Alabama
has lost twice.
Alabama is
and they had a close game at South Carolina as well.
Correct. Yep. Alabama beat Georgia, though. Georgia's only loss on the season at this moment.
Yeah.
But also Texas lost to Georgia. So it's going to get real interesting here in the final couple of weeks in this top 12, how things are seeded. But ultimately, though, man, I think Texas will take this game. Billy Napier, he just secured his job for at least a little bit longer. You heard just the other day they said, "Oh, no, his job's safe." So, I mean, I know a lot of Florida fans have been they expect better, right? They expect better, but ultimately they think that Billy can get it done for this program. Remains to be seen. I mean, but for right now, they're just trying to play spoiler Jay and trying to get into a bowl game. Not top 12. Top 12 out of the equation, but they're trying to just get bowl eligible. So this be a good.
One interesting piece of information before we wrap up.
Yep.
This was out about Texas. John Tate, I don't know if you heard about it, but John Tate Cook II leaves the Texas football program. This is the guy that was number 26 on ESPN's 300 when he was recruited by Texas. But Texas has so many wide receivers that his production was so small that ultimately I think he felt like he could get more recognition going to another program where they weren't so logjam at the wide receiver spot.
Right.
Unfortunately, since he's a sophomore, though, he's not eligible for the transfer portal until December 9th.
So he's got to wait about a month.
Yes, but the school and Javonte both said, hey, it's a good partner of the ways. And I think they both wish each other well. But yeah, so John Tate Cook, somebody's going to get a hell of a good wide receiver out there, I'll tell you.
And we will see what happens. But yeah, I'm with you though, Jay. Ultimately, I think Texas will win this bowl game pretty handily. I don't think it's going to be a drumming, but I do think that it's going to be a comfortable victory. I'll go final score. Give me the Texas 31 and give me Florida 17. I think it'll be a good ball game, but I think Texas is just a better team in the end, and that's why I think they will win and improve their record. So it's already impressive 7-1. I think they'll go to 8-1. Well, for Jay McLovin of the Elite Sports and Entertainment Network, I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, share, and subscribe, Facebook and YouTube. And until next time, we'll talk to you again on another live episode.